The Valthok Empire stretched across 800 star systems, like a giant web of darkness. Their black warships moved through space like deadly shadows, bringing fear to every world they found. From his massive crystal palace on Dominion Prime, Emperor Kavran looked out at his endless empire. Bright dots of light floated in the air before him, each one showing a planet he had conquered. Billions of creatures across the galaxy bowed to his will, their homes now part of his vast collection. But one tiny blue dot kept blinking red on his display. Earth. That small, distant world had been refusing to surrender for over 50 years. Now, every time Kavran sent his fleets to crush the humans, they somehow managed to fight back. It made no sense to him. How could such a backward planet keep resisting the most powerful empire in the galaxy? The humans fascinated and frustrated him in equal measure. Their technology looked ancient compared to what the Valthok had built. They still used basic rockets and simple energy weapons, while his forces traveled faster than light and could destroy entire moons with single shots. By all logic, Earth should have fallen within days of the first attack. Instead, decade after decade passed and the stubborn humans kept fighting. His military commanders gathered around the holographic display, their scaled faces showing annoyance. Whenever Earth came up in conversation, General Vorthak, his chief military advisor, clicked his claws dismissively. "My Emperor, why do we waste resources on this insignificant rock? One human world means nothing when we control hundreds of others. Let them hide on their little planet. They pose no real threat to our empire." But Kavran could not let it go. The very idea that one small world dared to defy him ate at his pride like acid. He had conquered species far more advanced than humans. He had crushed civilizations that had traveled between stars for thousands of years. Yet somehow, these primitive Earth creatures continued to embarrass him in front of the entire galaxy. Other conquered races whispered about the humans who would not kneel. Some even seemed to take hope from Earth's resistance. This could not continue. If even one world could successfully resist the Valthok Empire, others might try to follow their example. Rebellions could spread like wildfire across his carefully controlled territory. The humans had to be destroyed completely, and it had to be done in such a devastating way that no other species would ever dare to resist again. Kavran made his decision. He would not send another small fleet that the humans might somehow repel. This time, he would gather the largest invasion force in galactic history. Every available ship, every trained soldier, every weapon of mass destruction would be pointed at Earth. The humans would face such overwhelming power that surrender would be their only option. Construction began immediately across dozens of shipyards. The Emperor demanded 12,000 of his largest battleships, each one capable of destroying cities with single blasts. Supporting them would be 2 million smaller vessels carrying troops, supplies, and specialized weapons designed specifically for conquering stubborn worlds. The logistics alone required the efforts of entire planets working day and night. As months passed and the Eternal Fleet took shape, Kavran felt his excitement growing. Soon, the galaxy would witness the final lesson in Valthok power. The Emperor stood before his war council as reports came in from across his territory. Ship after ship reported ready for the final assault on humanity. The Emperor's voice echoed through the crystal chamber as he addressed his assembled generals and admirals. His words carried the weight of absolute authority, the promise of inevitable victory that had conquered 800 worlds before Earth. The blue marble that had defied him for so long would finally learn what happened to those who refused to bow before the Valthok Empire. This time, Kavran declared to his war council, his eyes fixed on the blinking red dot that represented Earth. Humanity will kneel or burn. The stage was set for what everyone believed would be the final chapter in humanity's brief, defiant story. The moment Admiral Thurek had been waiting for finally arrived. Space itself seemed to tear apart as thousands upon thousands of Valthok warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. The sight was beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed before. Ship after ship materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting the distant light of Sol, like a massive wall of black metal and death. Thurek stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his fleet continued to emerge from the Swirling portal of hyperspace. 12,000 battleships, each one larger than most space stations. 2 million support vessels, carrying everything from troops to planet-cracking weapons. The armada stretched so far across space that it took several minutes for light to travel from one end to the other. Even Earth's own sun looked small and weak behind the enormous shadow cast by the Eternal Fleet. The Admiral had commanded fleets before, but nothing like this. This was not just an invasion force. This was the concentrated might of an entire galactic empire focused on one small blue world. Every other species that had faced even a fraction of this power had surrendered immediately. Most had not even bothered to fight. Through his tactical displays, Thurek could see Earth's pathetic attempt at defense. Fewer than 400 human ships hung in space around their planet, like tiny insects buzzing around a light. Their vessels looked crude and simple compared to Vilethok technology. Some appeared to be hastily modified civilian craft, pressed into military service. The humans had clearly thrown together whatever they could find, knowing that their end was near. The contrast was almost laughable. The greatest military force in galactic history faced off against what looked like a collection of primitive spacecraft that belonged in a museum. Thurek had destroyed larger fleets during routine border skirmishes. This would not even qualify as a real battle. With practiced efficiency, Thurek opened a communication channel to Earth's surface. He had given this same speech hundreds of times before to hundreds of different worlds. The words came automatically, delivered with the cold certainty of absolute power. He expected to hear the usual responses, desperate pleas for mercy, offers of unconditional surrender, or terrified silence. Instead, a single voice answered from the human flagship. The speaker identified himself as Commander Lee Hyun, and his tone was completely wrong. There was no fear, no desperation, no recognition of the hopeless situation Earth faced. He spoke with the calm confidence of someone discussing everyday business rather than the imminent destruction of his entire species. "You have 48 hours to withdraw from our space," Lee Hyun said simply. "This is your only warning." Thurek's mandibles clicked together in genuine amusement. In all his years of conquest, he had never heard anything quite so absurd. A human commander, facing the largest invasion force in galactic history, was giving him an ultimatum. The sheer audacity was almost refreshing after dealing with so many cowering worlds. "Your world dies in 1 hour," Thurek replied, his voice carrying the casual certainty of someone who had delivered on such threats countless times before. He cut the communication and turned to his weapons officer. It was time to demonstrate exactly what the humans were dealing with. The demonstration would be simple but effective. Earth's moon hung in space like a perfect target, large enough for every human on the planet to see clearly. Thurek ordered his forward battleships to focus their main weapons on the ancient satellite. The humans needed to understand that resistance was not just futile but completely insane. The Vilethok weapons fired in perfect synchronization. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, each one capable of melting through the strongest known materials. The moon, which had watched over Earth for billions of years, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, casting its familiar light on the human homeworld. The next moment it was nothing but expanding clouds of glowing debris spreading slowly through space. Thurek watched the destruction through his viewports, expecting to see the human fleet finally react with appropriate terror. Surely now they would understand their situation and begin broadcasting surrender messages. Any rational species would be screaming for mercy after witnessing such a casual display of overwhelming power. But the human ships remained perfectly still. They held their formation around Earth without wavering, showing no signs of panic or desperation. Their silence stretched on as debris from their destroyed moon drifted past their hulls. Thurek found their behavior puzzling, but ultimately irrelevant. He interpreted their stillness as complete paralysis, brought on by pure, overwhelming fear. They were probably too terrified to even speak. Admiral Thurek checked his chronometer as the final minutes of his deadline ticked away. He had given the humans 1 hour to surrender after destroying their moon, and that hour was almost up. Looking through his ship's sensors at the human fleet, he saw exactly what he expected to see. Nothing. The pathetic collection of human vessels remained frozen in their defensive positions around Earth, like frightened animals caught in bright lights. What surprised him more was the complete lack of activity on Earth's surface. His deep scan sensors could detect individual cities and major installations across the planet, but there were no signs of mass evacuation or emergency preparations. No panic in the streets, no desperate attempts to hide underground, no frantic construction of last-minute defenses. The humans seemed to be going about their normal daily routines, as if the largest invasion fleet in galactic history was not hanging over their heads like a sword. This strange calmness actually annoyed Thurek more than open defiance would have. Every other species he had conquered had at least shown the courtesy of being properly terrified. They would fill their communication channels with desperate pleas. Their populations would flee to bunkers. Their leaders would make passionate speeches about dying with honor. The humans were treating his fleet like it was barely worth noticing. Well, that attitude would change very quickly. Thurek decided to begin the invasion with precision strikes on Earth's major population centers. He would not glass the entire planet immediately. That would be too quick and merciful. Instead, he would destroy one city at a time, giving the humans plenty of opportunity to watch their world burn and beg for the mercy he would never grant. The Admiral selected his targets carefully: New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, the largest. Human cities would burn first, their destruction broadcast across the planet, so that every human could witness the price of defying the Valthok Empire. Once a few million humans were dead, the rest would surely abandon their inexplicable calm and start behaving like proper conquered people. Thurek's lead battleships began their descent toward Earth's atmosphere. These were his most powerful vessels, each one carrying enough firepower to level entire continents. Their energy shields flickered and shimmered as they entered the outer edges of Earth's atmosphere, deflecting the planet's weak attempts at defensive fire. The human weapons that managed to hit his ships barely scratched their advanced armor. Inside the battleships, weapon systems hummed to life. Massive energy cannons that could crack planets began charging their primary batteries, targeting computers, locked onto the helpless cities below. In a few more seconds, the real demonstration of Valthok power would begin, and the humans would finally understand their place in the galaxy. Then something impossible happened. Without any warning, without any visible cause, every single ship in the Eternal Fleet simply stopped working. Not just Thurek's flagship or a few unlucky vessels. Every ship, from the mightiest battleship to the smallest supply transport. 2 million spacecraft, spread across millions of kilometers of space, all went dark at exactly the same instant. The bridge of Thurek's flagship plunged into emergency lighting as the main engines died. His tactical displays flickered and went blank. The steady hum of the ship's reactor faded to silence. Around him, his crew frantically worked at their stations, trying to understand what had happened. Nothing in their experience or training had prepared them for this. "Engineering report," Thurek barked. But the response only made things worse. Every major system on the ship had failed simultaneously. Engines, weapons, shields, communications, everything that made his vessel an instrument of conquest had simply turned off. Only life support remained active, running on emergency power that would last perhaps a few days. Through the ship's viewports, Thurek could see the same thing happening across his entire fleet. Millions of ships drifted helplessly through space, their engines cold and dark. The most powerful military force in galactic history had been reduced to scrap metal floating in the void. Then, as if to add insult to injury, every ship in the fleet received the same transmission at the same time. The communication came through channels that should have been impossible to access with their systems down. It bypassed every security protocol and appeared on every screen throughout the armada. The face that appeared was not what Thurek expected. Instead of a human military commander or political leader, he saw a middle-aged woman in a simple white laboratory coat. She sat in what looked like an ordinary research facility, surrounded by equipment that seemed almost primitive by galactic standards. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical style, and she wore no military insignia or symbols of authority. Dr. Kim Tae looked directly into the camera with calm, intelligent eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried no anger, no threats, no emotion at all. She sounded like a university professor addressing a class of students rather than someone speaking to an invasion fleet that had come to destroy her world. "I am director of Earth's Xenological Research Division," she said simply. "We need to talk." Dr. Kim settled back in her chair and began to speak in the same calm, measured tone she might use to explain a scientific experiment to her students. But the words coming from her mouth turned Admiral Thurek's understanding of the universe completely upside down. "Admiral Thurek, Emperor Kavran, and all the forces of the Velthok Empire," she began, looking directly into the camera, as if she could see each of them personally. "You have been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding for the past 50 years. Earth has never been desperately fighting for survival against your attacks. We have been conducting the most successful intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history." Thurek felt his blood run cold. Around him, his bridge crew had gone completely silent, hanging on every word from this unassuming human scientist. What she was suggesting was impossible, but the evidence was floating dead in space all around them. Dr. Kim continued without any change in her gentle tone. "Every fleet you sent to attack us, every weapon you fired at our ships, every piece of technology you brought into our solar system, we studied all of it. Our scientists analyzed every energy signature, every materials composition, every design principle. You essentially gave us a complete technical manual for your entire civilization, delivered one battle at a time." The doctor gestured to something off camera, and suddenly the transmission showed detailed holographic displays of Velthok ship designs. But these were not the crude scans that primitive sensors might produce. These were perfect three-dimensional models showing every internal system, every weapon placement, every structural weakness. The humans had blueprints for ships that were supposedly secret military designs. "Your energy weapons work by manipulating subatomic particles through controlled magnetic fields," Dr. Kim explained, as if she were teaching a basic physics class. "Your faster-than-light drives create temporary bubbles in space-time using exotic matter reactions. Your defensive shields operate by redirecting incoming energy through parallel dimensional layers. We figured all of this out within the first few years of your attacks." Thurek's mind reeled as he tried to process what he was hearing. The Velthok Empire's most closely guarded technological secrets were being casually discussed by a human scientist like they were common knowledge. Technologies that had taken his civilization thousands of years to develop, the humans had apparently mastered just by watching them in action during battles. But Dr. Kim was not finished. "Once we understood your technology, we did what humans do best. We improved on it. Your weapon systems are impressive, but they rely on incredibly inefficient energy conversion processes. Your ships are fast, but they waste enormous amounts of power maintaining their dimensional bubble drives. Your shields are strong, but they have predictable resonance frequencies that can be exploited." The transmissions switched to show what looked like a modest research laboratory filled with equipment that seemed almost laughably simple compared to Velthok military hardware. Yet somehow, this basic-looking facility had just shut down the most powerful fleet in galactic history. "What you're experiencing right now is our solution to the energy inefficiency problem," Dr. Kim explained. "We learned to tap directly into zero-point energy, the fundamental power source that exists in every cubic centimeter of empty space. This allows us to do things that your science considers impossible, such as selectively shutting down specific electronic systems across interstellar distances." The implications hit Thurek like a physical blow. If the humans could disable his entire fleet from their home planet, what else could they do? How long had they possessed this incredible power, and why had they never used it before? As if reading his thoughts, Dr. Kim answered his unspoken questions. "We developed these capabilities gradually over the past 30 years. Each of your attacks taught us something new, helped us refine our understanding of galactic technology standards. We could have ended your invasion attempts at any time during the last 2 decades, but we preferred to remain hidden and continue learning." At this point, another figure stepped into view beside Dr. Kim. Park Jin appeared to be a government official rather than a scientist, dressed in the formal attire of someone accustomed to making important decisions. His expression was more serious than Dr. Kim's, carrying the weight of authority and responsibility. "I am Earth's defense minister," Park Jin announced, his voice carrying subtle steel beneath its measured tone. Dr. Kim represents our scientific community, but I speak for our government and military forces. The Veltok Empire has forced us to reveal capabilities we preferred to keep secret. Park Jin looked directly into the camera, with eyes that had clearly seen too much conflict over the years. The truth is, we could have left this solar system any time in the past 30 years. Our ships are faster than yours, our weapons more powerful, our technology more advanced. We chose isolation not from weakness but from a desire to avoid exactly this kind of confrontation. The defense minister's expression hardened slightly. Your persistence has ended that choice. Earth will no longer hide what we are capable of. Dr. Kim adjusted her laboratory coat and looked directly into the camera with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the entire conversation. What she said next would change the course of galactic history, yet she delivered it in the same gentle tone someone might use to discuss tomorrow's weather forecast. The Veltok Empire will cease to exist, effective immediately, she announced simply. All conquered worlds will be granted immediate independence. A new galactic council will be established where every species, regardless of size or technological development, will have an equal voice in decisions that affect them. Admiral Thurek felt his heart stop beating for a moment. The audacity of what this human scientist was calmly proposing was beyond comprehension. She was essentially demanding that the greatest empire in galactic history simply dissolve itself, because she asked nicely, 800 conquered worlds, thousands of years of expansion, the dreams and ambitions of countless Veltok generations, all of it should just disappear because one human woman thought it was a good idea. But before Thurek could even begin to formulate a response, Dr. Kim continued speaking. To demonstrate that these are not empty words, we will now provide a small example of our capabilities. She pressed something on her control panel that was completely outside the camera's view. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then Thurek began to notice something strange occurring throughout his flagship. The constant background noise of 60,000 Veltok soldiers moving through the corridors, talking, working at their stations. It was fading away into complete silence. Emergency reports began flooding the bridge from every section of the ship. The soldiers were simply vanishing. Not dying, not fleeing in panic, just disappearing entirely. One moment they were at their posts, the next moment they were gone, leaving behind only empty uniforms and equipment scattered on the floor. The same thing was happening throughout the entire Eternal Fleet. 60 billion Veltok soldiers, the largest invasion force ever assembled, were simply ceasing to exist inside their ships. In less than 10 minutes, 2 million vessels that had been crowded with warriors became floating ghost ships drifting silently through space. Dr. Kim watched this impossible demonstration of power with the same calm interest she might show while observing bacteria through a microscope. Every Veltok soldier in your fleet has been safely transported back to their homeworlds, she explained. They are unharmed and will find themselves in familiar surroundings. We simply felt it was time for them to go home. Meanwhile, across the galaxy on Dominion Prime, Emperor Kavran was experiencing his own shocking transformation. One moment he stood in his war room, surrounded by advisors and tactical displays, showing the glorious Eternal Fleet preparing to crush the human resistance. The next moment he found himself alone in his private chambers, wearing nothing but simple sleeping robes instead of his ceremonial armor. A small metallic device hovered in the air before him, projecting a holographic message. The Emperor recognized it immediately as human technology, though he had no idea how it had appeared in the most secure location in his empire. The message was brief and direct. Earth's complete demands for the dissolution of his empire, along with a demonstration of humanity's ability to transport any being anywhere in the galaxy instantaneously. As Kavran stared at the hovering message, he realized that if humans could move him from his war room to his bedroom without him even noticing, they could probably move him anywhere they wanted. They could transport him to the surface of a star, into the vacuum of space, or to a prison cell on some distant world. His personal safety, his palace, his entire empire, none of it provided any protection against this impossible human technology. News of the Eternal Fleet's fate spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Every conquered world learned that the greatest military force in galactic history had been neutralized by beings they had been taught to consider primitive and weak. More importantly, they learned that these same humans were demanding the immediate freedom of every enslaved species. The response was swift and decisive. Within 30 standard days, 800 worlds declared their independence from the Valthok Empire. Some announced their freedom through official government channels. Others simply stopped following imperial orders and started making their own decisions. A few celebrated with massive public festivals that could be seen from space. The empire that had taken 3,000 years to build crumbled in less than a month. There were no massive battles, no heroic last stands, no dramatic final confrontations between good and evil. The age of Valthok domination ended simply because a human scientist in a laboratory coat calmly explained that it was over. Emperor Kavran, who had dreamed of crushing humanity beneath his heel, found himself reduced to a local planetary leader with no subjects beyond his own homeworld. The irony was not lost on him that his obsession with conquering one small blue planet had ultimately cost him everything he had spent his life building. As the dust settled and the new galactic order began to take shape, Earth appointed Choi Min as their first ambassador to the newly formed Galactic Council. She stood before representatives from 800 newly liberated worlds, species that had never dreamed they would live to see freedom from imperial rule. Humanity seeks partnership, not domination, Ambassador Choi Min announced to the assembled delegates. We have the power to rule, but we choose to cooperate instead. The decision of how we move forward together belongs to all of us equally.